What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Check us out online at Rich Q on Q, Twitter, IG, and of course the YouTube channel. Our good friend Ally Miielnicki does a fantastic job. Nothing But Box podcast. Check him out on Twitter at NBL Podcast. She's ready to go. We got March Madness right around the corner. Selection Sunday conference tournaments. The NBA starting to heat up a little bit. It's kind of the pick a litter, my friend. So let's start with a little top 25 college hoops. And I'm telling you, I feel as though we've talked about this over the last several times we've done this, right? Over the last couple of weeks. It's just so hard to predict and bet and really go through some of these stats and some of these trends and figure out what teams are getting hot, which teams are starting to fall off. Every time I look up, there's another upset in college hoops, which makes me a little nervous to lay some units and shekels on some of these teams. But also, I think there's some value in knowing you can play some of these dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a few dogs last weekend. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm usually all about dogs come tourney time. A little bit more favorites come the regular season. We talked last week, especially home favorites on a Saturday. I feel like with the crowd behind them, they get pumped up. Weekdays are a little tough to figure out. I did take the over last night in the UCLA game against Arizona State. That over hit pretty early on in the second half. UCLA is one of my favorite teams that come tournament time. I love the makeup of this team. I feel like being on the West Coast, I get to see a lot more Pac-12 than perhaps people on the East Coast, even the Midwest. So UCLA is one of the teams that I definitely see as an Elite Eight, maybe even a Final Four.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Pac-12, right? So USC, Arizona State had an opportunity, big opportunities, right, to maybe kind of solidify seating in the big dance. They missed out on it. Now, I think if you really, if you break it down, you take a step further, you just mentioned UCLA, Arizona, they're probably going to be, I would say, maybe the only teams that are going to gain entry from the Pac-12. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, USC will get in as well. Arizona State, they had a chance last night. They got completely blown out of UCLA. It's a shame because they had a nice upset of Arizona last week on that ridiculous shot as time expired. But I don't really see Arizona State getting in. I think that obviously your bread and butter, UCLA, Arizona, USC might come in. They might be one and done in the tournament. But otherwise, the Pac-12 is definitely not as strong as it's been. You're not going to see an Oregon. You're not going to see an Oregon State unless one of these teams go wild in the Pac-12 conference championships. And you've seen that from years and years. Just a team comes out of nowhere. They don't belong in the tournament, and then they end up making some noise.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we've seen it too with some of these mid-majors making a deep run, and then all of a sudden they surprise everyone. They get to the Sweet 16. Arizona State, Auburn, Memphis, Michigan, brutal loss. UNC, they're 19-11. Oklahoma State, you feel bad for them. They're 16-14. They can't wait to get out of the Big 12. That's a brutal conference. Those are kind of my, I guess you can say, bubble teams right now. Do you have a team or two that you say to yourself, look, they're desperate times call for desperate measures. They've got to win this weekend and make a run in tournament play to have a shot?
Well, you hit the main team, the team that finished second last year in the whole championship, the UNC Tar Heels, and I'm a Tar Heels fan. If they have the biggest game of their season against Duke this Saturday night, if they don't win, there's no way that they're not making the tournament. I think they actually have to win outright still. I think that if they fall short in the ACC tournament, if they only make it through the first or second round, I don't think they're going to be considered. They don't have any very good quadrant one wins. They did beat Virginia last week, but Virginia's kind of been limping the last few games. So UNC, they need to win outright. I think they need to win the ACC championship. I don't think they will, but it would be such a disappointment if they go from being the preseason number one to not even making the tournament.
I mean, think about that for a minute. The men's basketball season, it's a long season. Once we start right around October or so, and think about 4 or 5 teams that at one time or another were quote unquote the best teams in the country, whether it was Houston, Alabama, UNC, whether it was Purdue. I mean, for UNC to kind of go out the way they've gone out this year, man, I'll tell you, I always believe the tournament's better when you have your Dukes and your Carolinas and even some of those stalwarts back in the day in the Big East, like my St. John squad, which is just horrible. They've dropped 5-7. They're going to get waxed by Marquette. Don't get me started. But point is, you want to see those teams, and having a tournament, to say North Carolina NIT bound as opposed to NCAA tournament, man, that's a rarity.
It really is. And obviously you don't have the Roy Williams, you don't have the Coach K rivalry anymore. It's completely new blood on the coaching staff. But UNC is still one of the most storied franchises when you look at college basketball.
Mhm.
To not have the Tar Heels in the tournament, it's just a shame. That was a great finals last year between them and Kansas, two of the best, again, franchises, if you want to call them, of schools in college basketball. So yeah, it's gonna feel like we're missing them, but again, they didn't earn it. So you
Yeah.
want the best teams in there, and I'm one that I've always supported those mid-major schools that really don't get any light shined upon them all season. They come in, they make the Sweet 16, they show they're better than these bigger majors. So I'm one that I'd rather see a mid-major team that maybe only has 2 or 3 losses make the tournament rather than UNC, who just hasn't looked good all season.
Yeah, fair point. Stacked Saturday afternoon, Alabama, Texas A&M, Iowa State, Baylor. Bears are playing really well. Providence against Seton Hall. I mentioned Marquette. Outstanding conference play, 16-3. I think they've won 10 out of their last 11. You mentioned Kansas. Kansas, listen, I think that's a tough matchup here against Texas, but the kind of game I'm highlighting is late in the evening, eighth ranked Arizona against the aforementioned Bruins that you just talked about right now, 4th ranked. And then you have Pittsburgh and Miami. That's also a game regarding 2 top 25 teams. What game or games stand out for you Saturday evening?
I like West Virginia over Kansas State. I think West Virginia has been playing very well late. They took Kansas to the ropes last weekend in Kansas. It was a double-digit spread. They almost actually came and beat them. They had a nice win, West Virginia did the other night. I think that they beat Kansas State, a team that I've thought was overrated all year. Kansas State did beat Kansas earlier in the year, I believe in January. But for me, I just don't think that they have the stamina to go the length. I like West Virginia this weekend. I also like Tennessee over Auburn. I'm big on the Volunteers this year. I loved when they defeated Alabama. It wasn't an upset by Vegas standards. They were 3-point favorites, but I love Tennessee entering the tournament. And another team I love this weekend is Kentucky. Kentucky, no one has talked about all year. They're slowly creeping their way back up into the ranked status. I believe they're ranked 24th right now. Come conference tournament time, you have Calipari as your coach. Yep. I would be very wary of playing Kansas.
So one thing, just to kind of piggyback your K-State and your West Virginia, I can't trust West Virginia. They're too sporadic for me. I think they dropped 6 of 8, but this, they live and die by the 3-pointer. So once you nullify that and you shut down their perimeter, I think they're in trouble. I'm actually thinking about playing the under in this one. I do like Kansas State. And to your point with Calipari, absolutely. I mean, listen, we talk about pedigree, but this is a huge game because Kentucky's sitting there 23rd ranked. They've won 20. Arkansas is at 19-11. So we always talk about getting to that 20th, 21st, 22nd type of win. If Arkansas can upset Kentucky, I think this would strengthen their case coming out of that conference. I pulled up their schedule. They had a really great start to the season. They were 11-1. They had a couple injuries. Then all of a sudden they got very sporadic. But think about this. They had a close game against Alabama. They had a razor close game against Tennessee. I think that'll bode well when it comes to Selection Sunday. But then, you lose against Texas A&M. Who knows? But I do like Kentucky in this game, but I do think Arkansas, is going to cover. How about that UCLA game? You mentioned UCLA. You think they're poised to make a deep run?
I really like UCLA, Rich. I really do. I've seen a lot of them this season. They just totally blew out the competition last night when it came to Arizona State. Yep. Whatever momentum Arizona State was riding on from that win at Arizona just totally diminished. I think this team can just score at will. Their defense might be a little shaky at times, but when you go toe-to-toe against a team like Arizona, who's been known for their defense, I think if anything, they could expose Arizona. I think that they're going to put up the points. I like UCLA.
Yeah, I love their guard play. Yep. I mean, I feel as though they're so deep when it comes to the guard position. Jack is a great player. Clark is a really good player. Campbell contributes. And I know we've talked about this ad nauseum. I mean, it's all about guard play come March Madness. And then you got Bama and Texas A&M. Purdue, Bama, Houston, if you kind of threw a dart right now, overall, who's your best team in the nation? If you look at those three.
For those three, on paper, you could say Alabama easily, but I think Alabama struggled ever since the incident we don't want to bring up again this year. But Purdue, to me, I know they have Zach Edey. I know he's probably going to win the Player of the Year award, the Woodham Award. But Purdue, I just never trust come tournament time, Rich. I really don't. And I like Matt Painter as a coach, but I just feel like when it comes time to play the defense, they don't have it. So I'm all on Houston for that when it comes to that. I think defense does win you tournaments. If you can shut down those guards, in Purdue's case, if you could shut down Edey, the big guy, I think that you're going to really make it far in this tournament. So out of those three, if you're asking me who I think is going to make the longest run, I'm going to say Houston. It's probably not the popular opinion. They do play in a weaker conference, but again, you see in the Big Ten year after year, these teams just beat up on each other. And I always think the Big Ten is way overrated. So I'm going to go with Houston.
Listen, I have no problem with that thought. And I think you're dead on with Purdue. I mean, they are one-dimensional, right? You take that center off the floor. They don't have a ton of production coming from the guards. The teams that really play good defense, those are the teams that you look at. I mean, you're seeing some of these teams that are only giving up 63, 64, 65 type of points in the Big Ten, in the SEC. Purdue, they've had issues matching up against a team like, say, Indiana, for instance. So I can't trust them. I still think Bama, and again, with the off the court kind of issues, you can't dismiss the type of player that Miller is. I mean, he's a forward that's ridiculously explosive. He's erupted for 41 against South Carolina. He had 26 the other day. You know, he can easily score 25 plus. I don't think it doesn't appear like that's going to be any type of distraction. Now, will they have their hands full against Texas A&M? That, again, their guards like to penetrate and dish. Yeah, I can see that. I'm not sold on Purdue. I do like Houston. I do like Bama, but I'm going to take it a step further and tend to agree with you. I think UCLA is poised to make a deep run here, man. They just, for some reason, I think they've kind of flown under the radar. You know, they've got that sneaky little appeal to them. You mentioned you get to see them a lot on the West Coast. You know, we stay up late, we get to see them, but it's far and few. And then you look at a couple games to round out Sunday. Michigan, I mentioned Indiana. Michigan has to beat Indiana. If Michigan has any type of inclination of trying to at least, open up the eyes of the selection committee, they have to make a deep run in the tournament. They have to beat Indiana. And Indiana is another team I think has very good perimeter play. They've got good card play. They're well coached. They've had some big wins. I can see Indiana, if they get a good seeding in a good region, I can see them making a run to maybe the Sweet 16.
I agree. You have Trace Jackson Davis, who, to me, I think, well, he's really been popping his name as of late. He can take on probably Zach Edey for best player in that conference. I don't think he'll win it, but he reminds me of someone like, it's not the same position. Kemba Walker was more of a guard, but when UConn won that championship, when Kemba Walker was on that team, he just exploded the entire tournament. You couldn't stop him. Trace Jackson Davis kind of reminds me of that potential to just come out and be the best player in that tournament and take Indiana far. I don't think that they're capable of getting to the Final Four, but they do have the potential. I would take them over Purdue probably in a 1-to-1 come tournament time.
Yeah, great point, because when Walker was on, he single-handedly won that Big East tournament. And and I love what you're suggesting and you're saying when it comes to Jackson Davis. He is one of those guys where if you don't watch a lot of Indiana or the Big Ten come tournament time, you're going to watch this kid and he might go off for 35. He might have one of those games. I mean, I pulled up his log, 26, 26, 23, 28, 20, 25. Oh, by the way, he's also looking to dish and he's good for a couple steals and a couple rebounds. So he's an extremely complete player. Have you, when we start talking about some of these bubble teams, does it influence your way or your thinking when it comes to betting these games? If it involves a bubble team, do you look at it more of sentiment or, hey, there's pressure on them, their backs against the wall, so I feel confident, taking them and say the 6, 7, or 8 points? Or is every game different regarding a bubble team?
For the most part, I'd say every game is different, but I will say the majority, I hate betting on a team that needs to win, because I believe when you need to win, you end up not winning. There's just too much pressure that amounts onto you. So I actually more often than not will go the opposite. You look at this Saturday, Duke and UNC. Again, I mentioned I'm a UNC fan. I'm not going to touch the game, but for me, UNC has to win. Duke, they haven't been the best all year. That's a game I just don't know if I trust UNC, even though they're home, even though they lost to Duke early in the year. I don't know if I trust UNC to win big in this one. It's just too much pressure. I actually do the opposite. I go against teams that need to win.
All right, good point. Ally M joining us, a host of Nothing But Locks podcast. They do a fantastic job. Again, check them out online on Twitter at NBL Podcast, part of Zensports, zensports.com/podcast network. Her and Robert break down everything from A to Z. All right, NBA. Can we get into a little association, please? Because my Knicks all of a sudden
they're making noise.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, the acquisition.
I did take them against the Celtics the other day.
That's a smart play. That's a very good play by you. Yep. They've been on fire. The acquisition of Hart. They're going for their 8th straight win. Brunson is a star. Randolph's kind of been reborn. They're laying 3 tonight on the road in South Beach against Miami. Listen, one of the things I looked at with the Knicks, 27-16 ATS, when they've scored more than 108 points, they're able to score a lot of points. Conversely, Miami 6 of 19 over their last 25, underdogs on the money line. I do think the Heat, put up a fight, but I think the Knicks, this is the game where I say if the Knicks are really legit, you have to go on the road against Jimmy Butler in Miami, and you have to beat this team. Now, I think they do it, but are they 3 better?
I think they do. I think they end up covering Miami. They haven't been playing well as of late, only 4 or 6 in their last 10. The Knicks are in an entirely different direction, 9-1 in their last 10. I'm going to ride the hot team here, Rich, until they give me any reason to go against them. I'm going to take the Knicks. They're crawling up that way. They're 5th right now in the Eastern Conference. They have a shot to overtake the Cavaliers with that 4th seed. That would give them probably, I would say, home court advantage for the first round. I think that is so paramount to them. I'm going to ride with the Knicks. I think that they're hard. I think Miami's going in the other direction. I don't know if I trust Jimmy Butler to get it done. It seems like, everyone, I always thought Jimmy Butler was one of the most overrated players in the league. I know he had a few big games last postseason, but more times than not, I feel like he comes up short when it really matters.
Wow. See, I go the opposite. I look at that game the other night against the 76ers. Butler, to me, he's a dog. You want that guy on the floor, right? And I think he takes it among himself to put more pressure on him when it comes to offense. Listen, Hero's got to step up. Who's the center? And the name's escaping. Yeah. I mean, they put up points, but they have defensive laps here and there. So I've always been a Jimmy Buckets fan. So he might hear this before tip off and go off for 45. We don't know. 2 other games, and then I want to get some of your plays. You got the Nets and the Celtics. Celtics, we mentioned, stubbed their toe a little bit the other night against the Knicks, 4 of 5. Listen to me, Brown, Tatum, Smart, the big 3. We know where Brooklyn's at. We know where they're at mentally. I just think they're a shot team right now, even though they're hanging around. The numbers suggest maybe you play the Nets in this one, but I like the Celtics.
Yeah, I agree with you. I made a play on the Nets last week. They've just been so disappointing, lost 4 straight lately. Celtics dropped a half game out of first. They want that home court advantage throughout the entire playoffs. I think they turn it on tonight. I don't think they want Milwaukee to make too big of headway against them in the standings. It's a big spread, 11 points, but they're home. They're one of the teams that play the better at home, I believe, than away. I think the Nets at this point are just floundering. They'll be happy if they even get into a playing game. So it's a big number, but I think that this is a blowout tonight.
Yeah, I tend to agree. 2 games that I've kind of opened my eyebrows a little bit. The T-Wolves and the Lakers late tip-off. That's pretty much a pick 'em. That's an even game right now. And we know about the issues with LeBron. I mentioned it earlier in the week in BYP. Do we really care? We're not being disrespectful that LeBron's going to be out a couple weeks because the Lakers stink. They're just playing out the string. But this is a perfect opportunity for Anthony Davis to kind of say, okay, let me see what I can do without LeBron. I tend to lean towards Lakers at home.
So with the Lakers, it's kind of a love-hate I have with them. I'm not a fan of LeBron. I'm not a fan with Anthony Davis. However, going up against Minnesota at home, I do think that they will win this game tonight. I'm not really that impressed with Minnesota. I believe they're hovering around the 500 mark as well. Two bad teams kind of going in the same direction of whether or not they're going to make the postseason. And Timberwolves have been such a disappointing team, especially after all their offseason acquisitions. I'll side with the Lakers in the home court.
Yeah, the Western Conference is very it's top heavy, right? Because you've got Denver, you got Memphis. Sacramento is still kind of figured out. They played well this year, but they're young. And then we look at the acquisition of Kevin Durant to Phoenix. And look, to me, if the Phoenix Suns don't get to an NBA Finals, am I going to sit here and rip Kevin Durant his legacy? No. Am I going to say, he maybe hasn't come up big? Sometimes it's almost like the Aaron Rodgers syndrome a little bit, even though he's won. It's tough, man. I'm trying to think of who can really dethrone Denver. Like when you look at it right now on paper, is it Phoenix? Is it a healthy Golden State? Is it Dallas? I think the Clippers are a mess.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, that's one of my plays tonight. Kings laying 8 points at home against the Clippers. It might seem like a big number. I don't think so. I like the Kings here. I think that they are just motivated. I think Mike Brown has done a tremendous job with them. I'm a huge De'Aaron Fox fan. So I would lay the 8 points at home with the Kings tonight. Another game I like, well, you want to see, can the Grizzlies go head to head with the Nuggets? I think they can. I'm going to take the 5 points with the Grizzlies. I know it's in Denver. I know it's a tough place to play, but John Morant, he's just on a different level. I know Jokic is on a different level too. He's going to win the MVP again, but I like their swag, the Grizzlies. They're not afraid to trash talk. 5 points. I think I'll take that with Memphis.
I would err towards playing the over 2 in that one. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I just think it's going to be a track read. The last game that I kind of highlighted, it's two bad teams, the Magic and the Hornets. The Hornets actually, not the other night against, and it's escaping me. They managed to cover at 10. Magic are laying 3.5. Even though they've had 3 of 5 losses, they got waxed the other night against the Bucks. They didn't cover 8.5 points. But on Friday nights, they're 4-0 Friday night, 6-0 ATS in their last 6 following a loss of 10 or more points. So do that with, do what you want with that. But I do think the Magic, even though their record doesn't show it, they played hard this year. They're a couple pieces away because they got that young kid. That's a fantastic player to watch. Yeah, fantastic player to watch. So I'm actually going to throw a couple units on the Magic on the road.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice play. The Hornets are another one just spiraling down. LaMelo Ball is going to be out again. Who knows for how long. I think that they're a team that just doesn't have an identity, Rich. I really don't. Who do you have? Terry Rozier that's leading your team at this point. Just a mix of veteran guys and young guys. I don't really know where this team is headed. Magic, I think that they're going to be a competitor next year. I think that getting them another year older, they're going to be one of the teams that are in like that 7th, 8th spot all year. So I would like 3.5 with the Magic.
All right. Real quick before I let you get out of here for another minute or two, a little NFL. So where are you at right now with money wise when it comes to Daniel Jones? Because my belief is I don't care how much he wants. It's just a question of, will the Giants and or another team offer? Look, you're at a job. We all work. I mean, we should think we have some type of monetary value to what we do. So for him, whether it's leaked or not, or accurate or not, I think they get a deal done. And you know this, when it comes to negotiations, sometimes one party walks away not 100% happy. That's why it's negotiations.
Right.
But ultimately, you got to figure out common ground. So you think a deal gets done within the next week?
I do. Obviously, he's not getting $45 million. I think that was just a starting point. You always give them your just a ridiculous amount, knowing that they're going to negotiate down. I think we settle with him somewhere in the high 30s per year, maybe around like 36, 37. I think it's about a 3-year deal we get done. Hey, I'm not a fan of the franchise tag. I think Daniel Jones is trending up. I think he's going to do much better this year with a legit receiving squad. I don't know what that looks like yet, but we'll see after free agency in the draft. So the last thing you want to do is franchise tag him and have him worth not 45 million next year, but 50 million if he brings us to the playoffs again. So I think a deal will get done.
And what do you get in the Jet fan base all up in arms saying they're going to, Carson Wentz is landing with the Jet. Carson Wentz, his starting days in the NFL are
The Jets might not have anyone else. I mean, are they going to start Mike White again? I don't know.
Well, I think what they did is, and I've tweeted this, I've spoken to you about it, I've spoken many episodes of BYP and radio hits. I think what they did is they are being held prisoner by this notion that Aaron Rodgers is going to get moved and he wants to go to the Jets. And you can't run a franchise like that, especially with the draft right around the corner. My suggestion, my thought was just go after Derek Carr. Derek Carr can give you 3, 4, 5 years of competitive football. You've got that defense ready. You've got some younger players. Aaron Rodgers is not meant for the New York market. And you're right. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't get moved, if Carr says maybe goes to the Saints, and then, this is the NFL, you retread these quarterbacks, but oh my God, I cannot imagine for the life of me, Carson Wentz taking
he's going to get a deal somewhere. He's going to be a starter in week 1.
Well, because the NFL stinks when it comes to that. You know that.
Yeah.
These teams are so desperate. And what are they going to do? Carolina, Tampa Bay, they'll pay for a quarterback because they need a quarterback. But, I'm surprised you guys weren't getting trolled more than that. I'm like, what is she wishing upon Jet fans?
Hey, I would love to see to survey Jets fans and see who would they rather have week 1, Carson Wentz or Zach Wilson as their starting QB.
I would take Zach Wilson.
I would too. The kid has an attitude problem, but I think at this point Carson Wentz is just damaged goods.
It's between the ears, and it's amazing. Has a quarterback had that type of drop off, right? Because think about it, 2017. He's arguably the MVP. If he doesn't get hurt on the road against the Rams and Nick Foles comes in now, granted, if he's healthy, who knows if they win a Super Bowl? The quarterback position in the NFL. Like I would love to see. I might have to research. The landing spot, the odds of Carson Wentz's next team. He might be friggin' playing in the XFL. Who knows?
And I don't even think he'd be the best player if he played in the XFL.
Well, yeah, but you stick him on the Jets and see how he does. All right. I know you said that you guys got the pod dropping later on today or this weekend.
We have it later on today. We're going to be talking more in depth about the NCAA conference championships coming up. We'll get into all the big ones, ACC, SEC, Big Ten, Big East, Pac-12, all of those, give our favorites, give our sleeper teams, and then we're just going to be gearing up for Selection Sunday next weekend.
Yeah, it'll be, it's always a fun, I think the first 2 days of the tournament,
it's great.
You have to take off school. It's a religious holiday.
I used to always go to Vegas. That was my yearly Vegas. Well, I would go a few times a year, but I was consistently going to Vegas for the first weekend of March Madness for about 3-4 years in a row before COVID hit.
How crazy was that?
Oh, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It really is. It's probably the most crowded you'll see Vegas for that whole weekend, but just so much bets going on and everything. So
yeah, the only problem with AC with the casinos is they charge you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
To get it. See what happens. Like for instance, Borgata, they have what they call the surface lot. So when you walk in, you have the horse betting, the horse racing to your left, and you have the sports bar to your right before you go make a beeline to the casino floor. But what they don't realize is because it's so wide open with so many TVs, you get the little vagabonds who don't want to spend $100 to get in there, and they just kind of sit back and they hang out in the hall.
Yeah.
They mess up traffic and whatnot to watch the games. But no, next week will be fun. We'll dive into as you mentioned, a lot more college hoops, NBA. I want to start getting into some futures in baseball. Maybe we can talk some totals with a couple teams we can highlight, and we can certainly dive into that as well. So don't forget, everyone tune in. Ally does a great job with Nothing But Locks podcast at NBL Podcast. Follow them on social media as well, part of Zensports, zensports.com/podcast network. They're going to drop a new episode, as she said. She'll try to will Carson Wentz on the Jets. Daniel Jones gets paid next week. She will be happy. Always appreciate you jumping on BYP.
All right. Thanks, Rich.